Good afternoon, or I guess good morning, depending on where you are. Welcome to America Outdoors Spring Webinar Series. My name is Karen Short. I am the member specialist for America Outdoors. This series has one event left after today. That will be next week, Thursday. Today we are here with some legends in our industry. Our webinar today is called Lessons with Legends. We'll get that started here in just a couple of minutes. Before we start, I have a few just quick reminders, announcements from America Outdoors. I want to make sure that everyone is aware of the upcoming events that we have. Um, Obviously, our webinar series is going great, but we also have a Managers Academy, an online class coming up. That is coming up soon. So have that on your radar if you have any managers or if you are a manager who would like to get a little more education pre-season. Registration is still open for that. We have a few spots left. We also have 2 fall trips coming up. We have a rafting trip to Desolation Canyon that is hosted by Western River Expeditions. Going to be a great trip, going to be a great time to get together and be with others in the industry, share stories, network, come up with ideas, and just really like have drinks on the beach and have fun and enjoy. We also have one that's going to be really fun, the West Virginia Golly season experience that is brought to us by Adventures on the Gorge that has an overnight camping on the Gauley River, which is super exciting because it's not very often we get that chance. Um, Another great chance just to be together and to grow together as people in the industry. So I will eventually throw that events page in the link or in the chat for you guys. I'll throw that link in the chat, saying that backwards, for you shortly so you can check those things out. In the meantime, I don't want to waste any of this time because we have decades of great experience and stories and knowledge that I want to bring to you today. So we are having conversations with our 2023 Industry Achievement Award recipients. We are here today. We have Gaylord Staveley with us from Canyoneers Grand Canyon Adventures. And we also have Gary and Beth Harper from Man of River Gear. So as we get this started, I'm going to turn it over. Our event is hosted by Erin Bannon today, our executive director from America Outdoors. So Erin, I will let you take that over. If you have any questions, please feel free to type them in the chat. I will monitor that or type them in the question box, or we'll have a chance at the end if you want to raise your hand and have comments or questions there. But anyway, without further ado, Erin, take it over. Enjoy this webinar.
Thank you very much, Karen. And thanks to everyone for joining us today. Thanks so much to you all, Beth, Gary Harper, Gaylord Staveley, for taking some time with us today. So yeah. So at our conference, we had an opportunity to sit down with a lot of the folks who were foundational to the establishment of the industry and establishment of America Outdoors Association as well. And Beth and Gary, you were definitely in the room. Gaylord, you were in our spirits, absolutely, while we were in that conversation. And we had one question, which was like, what was the best advice you ever got from somebody, that led to about 3 hours of stories. So I'm excited to give our participants here a little bit of a taste of that experience that I felt very honored to be a part of, as I feel very honored to be facilitating this conversation with you guys today. So first of all, I'll say, yeah, Gaylord Staveley with Canyoneers, wonderful to have you here, author of 2 books, The Rapids and the Roars, and Taking Big Red. I encourage you all to go explore those annals of history of our industry. Beth and Gary Harper. Gary in 1977 took first place in the amateur documentary category for his film In the Beginning, the Ocoee River, 1977. So just to give you a sense of how much history is sitting here with us, we've got it. So I'm going to ask the advice question, but before I get to that, I think it's appropriate to start from the beginning. And maybe we'll start with you, Beth and Gary. How did you get started in all of this?
You start. I actually got in the river business. I was one of the original partners in Ocoee Outdoors on the Ocoee River in 1977, and I named half of the rapids on the middle of Ocoee that year. And Beth and I met the following April, and so even after the first trip, I was completely captivated by being on the rivers and being on the water, and just loved that, and loved river people too.
Mhm.
That's great.
Yeah, as Gary highlighted, I met him the second year that Ocoee Outdoors was operating, the second season, I should say. And what's funny is that we met on a blind date, and it's the only blind date either of us had ever been on. And I got to tell you, he made my stomach go zing. He was so different than any man I had ever met. On our second date, he took me down the river, and we just R2'd, and I was absolutely hooked. Uh, I got hooked on Gary, I think, a little faster than he actually got hooked on me. But for sure, I got hooked on the river. And it wasn't but a few months later, I was guiding too. And back then, there were not many women guides. So it was quite an anomaly, one, to be doing such a fringe activity and to be doing it as a woman.
And so the both of you met guiding together on the Ocoee and stayed together ever since. Just to dig a little bit more into the story, how many years did you guide together on the Ocoee, and uh, what transpired before
We
you
were
ended up co-founding the business that you have today?
Hmm.
Yeah, we were outfitters for 3 years, and then I sold my part of Ocoee Outdoors in 1980, and Beth and I went to work for another founding Ocoee company, Sunburst. And during our time at Sunburst, I had the opportunity to go to Grand Canyon and row a 14-foot Avon Ranger on a trip in 1982 at a fairly normal water level. And then Beth and I went back the next year in '83 and rode the baggage boat for oars, and it was the big water year. And when we launched, the water had come down a little bit. It had come down to 60,000, but that was still a whole lot more than we were ever used to, because the Ocoee normal water flow in the Ocoee is 12 to 1400 CFS, so 60,000 was quite an eye opener for both of us. But anyway, we survived. We didn't have great run. We did have great runs everywhere except Crystal, but that's a different
We
story
didn't
for a
flip,
different
it was a
day.
great run.
Yeah, that's good.
But Gary started a raft repair business, which is actually where our name Man of Rubber came from. A fellow we guided with told Gary that he breathed new life into old inflatables, so he dubbed him Man of Rubber. Um, but then we started picking up lines of equipment to sell. And it was through the Grand Canyon operation of oars that things really started to open up for
Yeah,
us.
we met Mike Walker, who was the Grand Canyon area manager for ours, and then we met George Wendt, and those two gentlemen were importing a line of riverboats from Italy called Domar, and Beth and I became the East Coast sales rep for Domar and the warranty repair station, and then we in the spring of '84, we picked up our second line of product, which is Chum's eyeglass retainer. So we
Hmm.
were Chum's first sales rep, and have been, and we're still their best sales rep. So it's it's we just love the rivers, and we just love the river people.
Yeah. Quick, great story about chums. It was actually invented by a Grand Canyon dory boatman, and he invented the machine that took the thread that spun it into the
Mike
tube.
Tackett.
Yeah, his name's Mike Taggett. And anyway, he stumbled upon us, and we were putting our product line together, and uh, Gary said, well, can we imprint names on them? And he said, yeah, I don't see why not. And from there we just hit the ground running with it. But another great example of innovation born on the river, he saw a need and fulfilled that need.
And then in 1987, Beth and I invented what is today known as watershed dry bags.
Right.
At the time, it was called Man of Rubber dry bags, but after building those for about 7 or 8 years, in 1994, one of our employees approached us about buying that part of our business, and he changed the name to Watershed. And so that's another unique thing that we came up with is the first really truly waterproof bag in the world.
Yeah.
Those
You're
bags are used
sprinkled.
by
Yeah,
yeah, those
your
bags are used
invention
by
is
the
sprinkled
military,
everywhere.
Yeah.
and every Navy SEAL that graduates gets one
Yeah.
or two, a complete set.
I think something that's really unique about Gary and I, well, first, we're a husband wife team that has survived not only this many years of marriage, but this many years of being in business together,
Mm-hmm.
is that, we both have different fortes and expertise.
Yeah, we're
And
very different, which is a
yeah,
good thing.
we're very different. But when I met Gary, I was managing a ladies' dress shop, and I had a pretty big staff and was in charge of inventory and payroll, merchandising, store layout, sales, the whole thing. And that was a niche that I created for myself with the outfitters because they really struggled with creative visual merchandising in their store. Stores were kind of an afterthought. They got into the business to run the river, not sell product, but that product makes you very, profitable. So when I launched Merchandising Magic, it was just another avenue for us to fill a need with outfitters. And I think that all of these combined skills that Gary and I have demonstrated through the years makes us more than purveyors of merchandise, but actually, you know, um, trusted partners because we've been outfitters, we've been managers, we've done every aspect of the outfitting.
We've always tried to treat our clients as friends
Yeah,
and treat people the way we wanted to be treated.
yeah,
Seasoned advisors as well, I would sense. Yeah.
yeah.
Well, um, Gaylord, I'd love to ask you the same first question. And I think at this rate, I've got like 15 questions. We're going to get through 3 of them, but that's like, they're here to stimulate this conversation. So that's perfect. Uh, Gaylord, how did you get started?
Well, the short version is that I met and married Joan Nevels, whose father had a reputation as the world's greatest freshwater boatman. We were, the way that happened was that we were boys in Iowa, and we between our summer vacation and return to school, we wanted to go somewhere and do something. So we decided we'd go to Colorado, and we pooled our gas and drove out there, sleeping by the car on the side of the road. And we went to Royal Gorge, and we went to Pikes Peak, and then 2 or 3 days we were done. And we said, well, let's go to the Grand Canyon.
Hmm.
So we looked at the map. There was a shortcut to Grand Canyon from Royal Gorge area, southern Colorado, uh, down through Monument Valley. And we said, well, let's go do that. And there was a map of the time that had a little dotted line that was the road down through there. So we started down there. And at the end of a really long day, after landing Utah, there was not much road, it was tracks. Uh, Toward the late afternoon, we got to Mexican Hat, and there was a little lodge there, and we stopped to say uh, to stop to ask how much farther is it to Grand Canyon, and how long will it take us? And the answer wasn't very encouraging, so we decided we'd stay there overnight. And Joan and her girlfriend were then visiting there. Her parents had been killed in a plane crash 2 years before that, and she and her girlfriend were visiting the grandmother. And so they decided they'd show us around Mexican Hat. And one of the things they showed us was the landing where Norm Nevels had launched his boats down by the San Juan trading post. And the other was the remains of the wreckage of their airplane.
Wow.
And uh, when we looked at that, it bothered Joan a lot. She teared up, and it made me very sad. We left the next. We after it got dark, we went down and got the wreckage and threw it off the bridge into the river. And next morning we left and got to Grand Canyon. Uh, camped at Cameron, went on through and went on back home. Well, I started writing to Joan. I had asked for her address before we left, and I sent letters and letters and letters, trying to be funny and make her laugh. Finally, after several weeks or months, she sent me a picture of her school photo and a little note that said, if you're ever out there in the desert country and want to see this wild desert girl, why don't you? So in
The
the
next
following
day,
years,
Yeah, the next day. Exactly.
and sort of courting her by mail, sending her funny stuff. And I was then in the Air Force, so I had temporary duty overseas in Europe, Montana, and Japan. And so during that time, it was with the letters exchanged. It was kind of understood when I got back we'd get married, and so we did that in December of 1954, and went back to Iowa because I didn't know where else we would go. But uh, as a wedding present, Frank Wright, who had acquired the Neville's expeditions, invited us to come and run the river.
Mhm.
Joan, to her credit, said, "No, you go." By then, we also had a year-old son named Cameron, and she said, "You go ahead and do that. I'd like you to do that." So I did, and we had a San Juan. I had a San Juan trip, a Grand Canyon trip, and after I got home, I wrote to Frank and said, "I really like that. And if you're ever scraping the bottom of the barrel for a boatman, I'd like to come out and do that." And he wrote back and said, "Well, I do need a boatman, but I also need a partner." And he said, "Would you like to be a partner?" And of course, we jumped at it. Joan was not happy in flat country, and not and on desert country. So we jumped at that and moved back west. And at the end of that year, which was 57, Frank offered me the rest of the company. So in 1958, I was on my own. And we moved from Grand Junction down to Mexican at 5 days for the first San Juan trip and had a fine season. Uh, I guess the rest is history, but we went on to develop and perpetuate the Neville's Company in quite a few forms. And as we all know, there was a lot of turmoil to get to where we and American Outdoors are today. And it's an interesting story. I had fun reviewing it.
that's fascinating. Thank you very much for that, and um, amazing to think that you were both able to develop that relationship without hardly talking to each other for years. So these days it's a little different.
It's a
Um,
wonderful story.
Yeah.
yeah. Well, yeah, I'd be interested to delve in a little bit to some of the history of like the Western River Guides Association and the Professional Paddle Sports, or not Professional Paddle Sports Association, but
E-Pro.
ePro and everything that evolved into the association we have today. But first,
Mhm.
I have a different kind of question because you are certainly our mentors in the industry. But I have two questions here, sort of tied into one. One is like, who were your mentors in the industry as you were coming together? And tied into that, I think the advice is appropriate time to think about the advice question. Like, what was some, well, what was the advice that you got from this mentor that stays with you, or what was some advice you got along the way that was, some of the most powerful advice you ever got? Gaylord, I talked really softly. I'm sorry. uh, but like, who was a mentor for you in the industry is where we're starting. And yeah, we'll just follow the pattern. And Beth and Gary, if you want to.
Okay. Well, obviously, Gary was my first mentor because he was the first river person I ever knew. And he was so creative, just always thinking outside the box.
Yeah.
Um, later on, as we moved over to Sunburst, um, you know, Mark Hunt, who owned Sunburst, was very important in my growing. And I was the office manager, reservation manager, store manager. I was a guide and a trip leader. Uh, these were the days we bought the first computer, personal computer there was at Radio Shack. It was a Tandy. And so that was years before Windows was even thought of. So we were learning DOS and doing these DOS commands to get this computer to print out mailing labels. It was crazy. But I learned so much with Mark, and he really helped, you know, helped me to see the vision of organization. And I'll always be grateful to him for that. And because I had set so much up for Sunburst, it was a very easy transition for me, uh, to help Gary in those first few years when he was getting MOR going. And then, of course,
Business acumen.
yeah, and when I finally got the nerve up to quit my day job so I could live my dream, then we had the energy of both of us, and it was so much better. And as far as advice goes, I guess it's been my mantra, uh, dream big because dreams come true. And you just have to be true to yourself and just remember what that dream is.
One of my
Simple,
mentors
elegant.
was
Thank you.
George Wendt,
Hmm.
who we worked for selling the Domar river boats. And, George was a very kind and gentle and soft and easy person. And for me, he was
Hmm.
always very easy to deal with. And I always admired, the way that he conducted himself.
Hmm.
Another mentor was Mike Walker, who was George's partner in Domar. And some advice that Mike Walker gave me one time was to never judge a person that you haven't met because of something that somebody else had said about them or somebody else's opinion.
Yeah.
And that has been a very important thing for me to remember ever since Mike passed that along to me. And also, Grand Canyon boatman Tony Anderson gave me some advice once that he recommended that in order to get respect, you have to give respect. So
Hmm.
those have been some words for me to try to remember and live by.
I'd like to
That's
interject
great.
something real quick here. Uh, to have, because George was such an important part of our life for years, uh, both working for him, rowing, and then the Domar experience. Last December, to receive the George Wendt Award
Hmm.
was so incredibly humbling. And to Gary and I, it
It
felt
just
like the circle had
came,
come
just
full
came full
circle.
circle.
To have that award in his name is beyond an honor
He
for
was
Gary
such a
and
big
I.
part of our early
Yes.
business life.
That's awesome. Yeah,
I promise
that's cool.
I
I
won't
was
cry
not
this
aware of
time.
that significance.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Gaylord, who for you was a mentor in your life, and what was some valuable advice you got along the way?
My mentors include Frank Wright because he gave me the opportunity to acquire the Knowles expeditions. My whitewater mentor was John Harper, big burly guy from Grand Junction. I rode with John on the San Juan trip, the invitation trip, and I rode with him on Grand Canyon, and he showed me and explained what he was doing, why he was doing it, how to run a rapid, how not to run a rapid, and it stood me in good stead. Uh, Several years later, I decided to put that all in letter form, and I wrote a technique paper on stern first rowing, and out of that grew a whitewater school that I operated for a few years as kind of ancillary to what Canyoneers was doing,
Mhm.
Mexican Hat was doing.
Okay. Entrepreneurs abound in this industry, certainly.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks for that. As as Gaylord, if I could stay with you for a little bit, like as you like were in this industry for the amount of time that you were in it, um, like I wonder what you saw as, let's say about like as the industry as a whole matured, as your peers in the industry evolved, and I would presume some of them became more professional, and as the managing agencies evolved as well. Um, like, what was that like? How did everybody manage through all this? Huge question. I'll break it up into parts if you like.
Mhm.
Yeah. Like if you could talk about the maturation and the professionalism of the industry.
Yes.
So as the industry
Yeah.
evolved, how did the professionalism?
Well, the industry, it was sort of in terms of decades, I guess. Uh, when we were running our first Grand Canyon trips, the only paperwork was a mimeograph sheet of 2 pages, and it said, "Who are your boatmen? Who are your passengers? When are you going, and when will you be out?" And on the side, they would say, "If you see anything down there we should know about, please come in and tell us." Uh, it later grew to the or operating requirements, which are in 40 some pages nowadays.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's a little more complicated than it used to be. I just sat in a 3-hour meeting about insurance last week, just to talk about insurance for concessions,
Mhm.
and that alone is 40 pages now. So a lot of changes, and Beth and Gary too. You were involved in the maturation and professionalization of the industry, as it relates to, like, I guess, need, let's say, on the East Coast, especially, to organize, or yeah, I hope that's relevant and appropriate for you, but like just need generally to organize the industry. Um, yeah, how what happened, and what was your involvement in
Um, I think I understand your question. I'm not sure,
that?
but
I'm
um,
thinking about like the early days of ePro, and I'm thinking about like AO coming together.
yeah.
You know, when the first ePro show that I ever went to was in Nashville, North Carolina, in 1977, and I was just overwhelmed by the campways, rafts, and the just I think Moravia might have been there, and just had never seen real professional riverboats because the rafts we started out with, um, they were old military type boats
Mhm.
and weren't really professional whitewater craft. And so then, you know, as far as ePro itself, initially they denied Dokoi Outdoors membership because they said that we didn't seem to be professional since we weren't using what they call professional rafts and stuff like that. So anyway, we immediately ordered some new campways, which were delivered that next spring. And
Mhm.
by the next year, you know, they decided they wanted to go ahead and let us into the organization. So it was a good thing because it encouraged us to, you know, be as professional as we could and as quickly as we could.
That's right. Because we're talking about, in this case, back here in the 70s, there weren't that many outfitters. I mean, there were outfitters sprinkled here and there, a couple in Maine, a couple in West Virginia, Ohio Pile,
Pennsylvania.
uh, and of course on the Chattooga, Mr. Griner had started and Payson had started NOC. But most of the people in the country live on the East Coast, so rafting exponentially exploded. I think that first year you guys were in business, how many did you take?
First year was 700. The next year was 3,500, and then the third year we took 7,000 people down.
So things were really rolling fast.
10x every year.
Yeah, yeah,
We're
yeah.
talking about the Ocoee.
We're talking
Yeah.
about the Ocoee, which is our home river. Yeah. Hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And I think at its peak it was doing something like 150 to 170,000 people a season.
Yeah. Or
In
more.
116 days, you
Yeah.
got to realize that we only have a contract for 116 days of water releases in the middle section of the river. The rest of the time, the water is in the flume line that goes between two dams that TVA operates.
Yeah,
And so,
TVA never, in the beginning and since the beginning, has never embraced tourism, or they've embraced tourism in other places, but they've never embraced whitewater recreation on the Ocoee. They were always very adversarial about providing water, and have always tried, any way they can to slow the outfitters' growth, or slow just in general the popularity of the river. And it took an act of Congress to change the TVA mandate to add recreational whitewater releases of water to the Ocoee's mandate. But even today, they don't really, in any great way, embrace whitewater recreation.
Right. And the state still pays millions, I think, to keep that river running.
The state is great. The state is wonderful. They are, they are the managing agency, and fortunately they are
they're a
they're
great partner to
wonderful,
the
wonderful
outfitters.
partner.
Yes.
Great. Yeah. And Gaylord, you were involved, I'm sure, in the establishment and formation of the Western River Guides Association, and involved in some of those early conversations as folks in the West came together. Maybe Grand Canyon, yeah, Outfitters and Guides Association too.
In well, there was a motto going around. It was a cartoon based on something, but it was chaos, and somebody was saying, "One of these days we've got to get organized." And so that was kind of where the outfitters stood. In in 1970, uh, Jack Curry was a member of WRGA, which was a fairly new organization,
Hmm.
and he established an outfitter organization named the Colorado River Outfitters. Uh, Not everybody joined that. Some held out, some were against it, some were trying to decide what to do. And in 1971, the Park Service issued a prospectus for Grand Canyon River trips, and there was a rush to be identified as an outfitter. Uh, on the park's April 1972 list, there were 21 prospective outfitters. Someone quipped that all you needed to do to be an outfitter was have a permit and a wife with a steady job in the courthouse. So, so it, it started booming then with the inflated boats, the competition to get a place in the launches and so forth. And during the 1970s, at Grand Canyon and some other places, they started developing management plans.
Hmm.
And the management plan era was pretty much turmoil, just a lot of circle running, handle grabbing. Uh, Both the outfitters and guides and the Park Service and the other agencies uh, were having to learn how to work differently and think differently. And it took 30 or 40 years for that really to work out to where it is now.
Hmm.
Complicated. That's great. And in the early 90s, there was a wedding, right? And as I look back at like the very first newsletter that came out of America Outdoors, there's actually uh, like a picture of the ceremony bringing
Yeah.
ePro and WRGA together. And certainly, Beth, you I know in the early days were involved in the board and
Yeah.
did some lobbying as well. Could you talk a little bit about those early days?
Yeah. I'm glad you mentioned the wedding. Uh, that show was in New Orleans,
The
Okay.
89.
the '89 show. And that's where the word confluence came from.
That was the pre-wedding.
Yeah. It was about the East and the West coming together for this confluence of great ideas and information sharing. Well, AO was really smart in creating a seat on their board for a vendor representative. The commercial membership is so important to the health of the organization on so many different levels. And
Absolutely.
The vendors voted me to take that seat. And I actually served on the board for 10 years. And I really wasn't sure what I was getting myself into. But the greatest thing about it, in my opinion, was that was during the days when the outfitter bill was being written and rewritten and rewritten. And that's when Camp Washington started, and we were going to Capitol Hill twice a year. And what was interesting about Camp Washington was that Scooch would have appointments set up to where you went with other people from the board in your state or a neighboring state. Well, lucky for me, David Brown was from Tennessee, so I was always in David's group, which was great because we got in the important people's offices. And of course, we all got to say something, but David really, you know, was driving it. And I had seen David in action before because he was the Ocoee River Council back when we were fighting TVA to get recreational releases, and he was the spirit and the drive that organized all of us. And I think the big lesson about being on the board of AO is, and even in those old ORC days, it was Civics 101. And I mean, this might sound Pollyanna of me to say, but every single person can have an impact on any outcome through involvement, through appropriate involvement, not monkey wrench gang stuff, but really working within the system to affect changes. And America Outdoors does a great job at that. And those Camp Washington experiences were priceless, as was working with the Ocoee River Council. We spent so much time on the river informing people about, if you don't help us, you might not ever get to raft this stretch of water again. And it was very empowering. And again, I'll use Civics 101 as as the gist of that experience.
That's fantastic.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, as Camp Washington happens to this day, it's cool,
Mm-hmm.
even, this year in particular, to see a nice blend of folks who've been doing it for a while, mentoring a lot of new faces who are coming in and learning uh, like their power, right? The
Yes.
voices of authenticity and
Yeah.
how you can leverage your voice by showing up.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a wonderful tradition that
Mm-hmm.
we carry on. So yeah, in terms of mentors, I one of my mentors is definitely David Brown, and I'm glad that he's still involved and
Yeah.
yeah, advising to this day because he has this yeah like uh, ocean deep
Mhm.
like wealth of knowledge, history, information, and strategy to provide. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, which actually I know there's a lot of people who are on this call who are keen to know like what the what the business lessons are, let's say, that you've learned in this time. So if you're, for the young people who are on this call, who are getting into management, who are taking on new responsibilities, running an outfit, I wonder if you, and Gaylord, we'll start with you. Do you have advice for the young people getting into business today to be successful in this industry?
People getting into the outfitter business today.
Go for it.
I was afraid you were going to say, "Don't do it."
Tempting. other times I would have said don't do it, but there are the the way has kind of been paved, uh, but it's also become occupied, and there just aren't any opportunities. We had to find a lot of other opportunities when we were trying to uh, perpetuate the company. Uh, Joan and I both worked at the uranium mill during the winters, and we started eventually after we got established. We incorporated it, and we started some other activities that were related but were opposite seasons, and used some of the equipment and guides from the summer into the winter, and that was really helpful. And it's still a good way to go to be diversified within the outdoor industry.
Mhm.
That's great.
My
Yeah,
advice,
for you as
my,
well, please. Yeah.
my advice would be to stay flexible if possible, as flexible as you can, and not get locked into a presupposed plan, because things change and you have to adapt to new
Mhm.
ideas and new situations as they come up.
Uh, I feel like you have to have a plan because opportunities and challenges are going to come along that require decisions. And if you don't have an idea, an end goal in mind, you really don't have a litmus test for making a decision about if you're taking the right road or the wrong road.
Mm-hmm.
And we've always been very conservative uh, and mindful about things like debt load, inventory control and management, not biting off too much than you can chew. That's when people either go out of business or their business runs their life. And I think one thing that Gary and I, one reason I think that we are a success, it's part of my litmus test, is that we've been able to uh, maintain and find balance. The business doesn't run us. We have lots of other things that we do, and these are called choices. And so you have to be mindful
Right.
about the choices you make.
And
Yeah.
can
Hmm.
Time is the true commodity.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
that's great. There's so I've started to bridge into like some questions that people
Hmm.
prompted us for
Hmm.
before we before we even started this. So just because they're flowing pretty well, I'm going to ask a couple more of these questions. And you're kind of getting at it. It's trying to figure out the right way to phrase this. Like the question is literally like, what are your profit margins? But I think the way that I want to ask this is like um, I have a perception that you're in the business because you love it, not because you want to make a lot of money.
Mhm.
That
and
is
uh, and so
correct. You are
and so
correct.
I would say like I think sort of to this earlier question of young people who are trying to get into this and might have some trepidation, like can you be successful in this industry today? Not necessarily like what are your profit margins going to be, but how hard is it to thrive?
Well, again, I think that goes back to what your end vision is. Like, why are you doing this? I mean, there's a lot of jobs out there, but a lot of them aren't very fulfilling. So, with every choice, there's a flip side. And so, we're not just purveyors of merchandise. We never have been. We've been all kinds of things. And so, I guess our idea of success might be different than someone just looking at it
Great.
analytically on a spreadsheet.
Are you fulfilled?
Yeah, are you fulfilled?
Yeah.
But now we like to take trips too, don't get me wrong.
Mhm.
Not trying to lose money.
Yeah.
What do you think, Gaylord? Is it hard to be successful in the outfitting industry today?
Is it hard to be successful in the outfitting industry today?
It's hard to be successful in the outfitting industry today because it's pretty full and it's being well done. But one way younger people get in now is is through the succession of generations,
Hmm.
Yeah.
father to son to grandson.
Hmm.
And
Or granddaughter.
that has a lot of attributes. It carries a lot of knowledge, technical and political, and just good general knowledge about how the way things work and how they have to.
Not me.
Not
Pause.
me.
We'll pause to answer the line.
I didn't hear that.
Oh no, I was just commenting on the phone. No, you're fine. Yeah, yeah, definitely bigger regulatory environment, but people are finding a way into this industry to this day. I think um,
Hmm.
still making progress. There's a very particular question. We have like a few sort of like fun, like pop, like rapid fire questions, but I want to make sure that we, with the time that we have left, not only answer some of the inquiries that have come from folks beforehand, but some of the folks who are on the call today have a chance to weigh in and as well. But so this is for you, Gaylord. What is your favorite part of the San Juan River down to Mexican Hat?
Which is part of the San Juan River.
Well, the rapid that was 6 miles long. I can't remember. I can't remember its name right now. It had every maneuver you'll ever need.
It's you can't find it anymore. It's like pre-flows. All right, and there's a particular question for the Harpers,
Oh boy.
which is and we sort of got at it, but I guess it's we can answer this in a way. But what prompted you to explore the Ocoee River in the first place? Beth, it sounds like Gary was the
I think
prompt.
appropriate answer there.
Yeah, Gary.
I grew up in this county where the Ocoee River is, and I remember as a very young child, 4 or 5 years old, my father driving up through there to visit my grandparents on the other end of the river. And my mother's family lived on one side of the river, and so we would go drive alongside the dry riverbed almost once or twice a month at least. And so this, and the only time I ever saw water in the river when there was a huge rainstorm. And then finally in the fall of '76, there was water in the river for the first time since 1912 because the flume line had deteriorated so much that TVA had to close it down. And so for the next 6 or 7 years, it ran almost every day up until '83. And so when I saw water in the river, I was just so incredibly captivated because, Koi, it's a bad thing and a good thing to have a highway beside it. But the good thing is that, I could see almost
Sure.
all of it from the highway, and I could even as a novice whitewater enthusiast, I could see that most of it was, it's very runnable and very would be a very enjoyable trip. So the first opportunity I had to go with my eventual partner in Ocoee Outdoors, JT Lemons, JT. He showed me the river, and I went down with him another time. And then on my third trip, I was taking customers down because we had started Ocoee Outdoors. So I was a professional river guide on my third trip, and I sure did lots to learn.
That's all it takes. That's all it takes. Yeah, swamp a bit, and then you'll run a place. Great.
Exactly.
All right. All right. So I'm going to do two rapid fire questions, and then we're going to pause and see if there's any questions that are coming from the audience. Those of you who are listening, if you want to just input your question, I think there's a question option. I think there's also just a chat option. You could put it into the chat. Um, we all can't see it, but Karen can see it, so she can bring those questions to us.
Yeah. Also, if I
Here's
can interject, feel free to raise your hand if you would like as well, and then I can unmute you to talk. So if anyone wants to comment
yeah,
or
cool.
ask questions, feel free to raise your hand. I'm checking on that too.
Okay, great. All right. What is your favorite camping spot? Beth.
My favorite camping spot was Elk chasm in the Grand.
Those guys are beautiful.
Mhm.
I liked it because there was a good tie up for the boats. You could camp on the sandstone right near the boats. There was spring water running by,
Mhm.
and there was an alcove there where there were some historic signatures. Uh,
Oh, cool.
Norm put a register book in there after he started running, and it was getting full. And I, when on my first trip, I said, someone is going to take this as a souvenir. So I took it out and gave it to the Park Service, and I
Mhm.
got scolded for it, but they kind of gave me a jab and said, thank you. That was my
You got
favorite.
scolded for
Mm.
preserving. Uh,
My favorite camping spot is Poncho's Kitchen. It's just such a welcome place, especially, if it's a little cool and got a little rain coming. So Poncho's Kitchen is just downstream from Deer Creek Falls on the Colorado River in Grand Canyon.
Of all the rivers we've run, I go back to the Grand Canyon, and I loved camping there at Nankoweap and really having time to explore the greeneries and the creek and kind of relax and catch your breath and calm down a little bit. But uh, it's, when you're talking about the Grand Canyon, it's really difficult to pick one
It
spot
really is.
because it's, almost 300 miles of fabulous. So, but I did
I'm,
love Nankoweap.
I'm getting that feeling of being at the Grand Canyon just by hearing you guys talk about it.
Yeah.
All these awesome camping spots. Yeah,
Mhm.
awesome. Okay, I said I was going to do two. Okay, well, I think it's probably going to be obvious given your answers to the first one, your favorite river, and so you do the river and then you answer your favorite backcountry meal. So, what's the best meal you ever had on the best river you're ever on?
For me, it's a toss up between the Middle Fork of the Salmon and Grand Canyon, but I have to go with Grand Canyon.
Mm, yeah.
And I learned so much rowing those oars trips with all those fantastic boatmen and boatwomen. And there was such an influx of SOBAC guides who, were doing first descents of the major rivers of the world, this wealth of information. But when Alexander
Favorite
Gag,
river is like so narrow because it's like the river is like this whole experience that happened at this river. So, yeah,
yeah, one
everybody.
of Orr's boatmen's name was Alexander Gagin, and he showed me how to bake bread on the river. And
Mm.
it involved a 5-gallon bucket and punching it down at lunch. And we had spaghetti that night and fresh bread, and it blew the minds of our clients. They just couldn't believe it. And then we had
Yeah,
ice
that's
cream.
definitely. Yeah,
My favorite
that's next
river
level.
would have to be the Colorado River through Grand Canyon, and one of my favorite spots on the river. In '84, Beth and I worked an 18-day hiker special trip with 4 oars, and we spent, let me think for a second, 4 days at Nankoweap, and then we spent 5 days hiking up Shinnemoo Creek, all the way up to the Merlin Motor Abysses, and
Hmm.
just
Wow.
so I'd have to say Creek is,
It
especially the
is.
upper part, a couple of days away from the river, is just one of the most magical places I've ever been to. There's actually a section there called where all the rocks and everything are gold colored, and there's places called Guinevere's Castle, and I don't remember all the places, but anyway, that's my favorite spot in the world.
That's so cool. Gaylord, what's your favorite spot in the world? And meal.
In the world,
Well, I for me, also on the river.
oh, my favorite river, I guess, was the San Juan because it was kind of the hometown river. It was in my backyard.
Hmm.
Uh, Favorite meal was the first one after the mules brought resupply in at Phantom Ranch or Whitmore. Fresh food.
Vegetables.
And
That's
my
great.
favorite meal is on the orange trips. We would always do a huge fruit salad on day 3 or 4 to get things moving and improve our attitude.
That would hit the spot.
Mm.
That's awesome. Karen, is there anything from the audience?
I don't have any additional questions at this time.
Okay, cool. I saw a thumbs up go there, but I don't, maybe that wasn't a hand.
Not a
Which is
hand
fine.
raised, just a thumbs up. But yeah, if
Okay.
anyone wants to share, feel free to raise your hand or type a question. Otherwise, Aaron, I would ask a few more of the ones we have already.
Yeah, I'll keep going. Cool.
We got about
Um,
5 minutes left.
I mean, yeah, we'll see how close we get. Okay, what was the best America Outdoors conference that you ever had?
New Orleans, without a doubt.
Yeah,
The
I'd have to say,
confluence
I'd say New Orleans.
when WRGA and EPRO came together. Yeah, it was fabulous.
The energy was
It was high
electrical.
energy.
Cool. What about you, Gaylord? Best conference?
Sorry, could you say that again? Best?
Best America Outdoors conference or confluence, as they were.
Well,
Yeah.
to be truthful, by the time AO developed, I was kind of conferenced out. And from the 80s, uh, and
Had your fill.
remember going to some. I remember Dave Brown and Scooch very well. Uh, in '92, AO had me testify to Senator Bumpers on concession policy, and there was a big argument at the time that we weren't paying enough, and he said, "Mr. Staveley, isn't it true you only pay 2%?" And I was able to say, "No, we're paying 6%, and it's been made retroactive." And that was such a feel good moment.
Mhm.
Now it's 20%.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. All right. Best song to sing around a campfire.
I'm with
Uh,
Beth on this one.
Well, Gary and I aren't much for singing, but one thing I do love around a campfire, another talent that my husband has, is he knows all the stories behind the stars and the constellations. And to hear that music about how, they got their names and the mythological stories behind them, for me, that's the best song.
That's very romantic.
Oh.
I don't remember any organized campfire singing. I remember a lot of storytelling
Yeah.
and just visiting and looking at the sky. Uh,
Mhm.
uh, there was a retelling of some of the tall tales from John Hance and some of those folks. Uh, John Hance had a story everybody liked to tell about Tough Luck O'Sullivan and the rubber-soled shoes, and it went that there was a cloud cover, and O'Sullivan was going to walk across on the clouds, and partway out the clouds broke, and he fell through, and because he had on rubber-soled shoes, he bounced, and he went down, and he bounced back up, and down and back up, and it was going on forever. So Hans said, "Well, I had to shoot him to keep him from starving to death."
Good.
I love those.
Yeah. That's wonderful, and a good place to be, I think, uh, for what we have. I think I can ask one more quick question, and then we'll have to wrap it. It's like, what is your like outside of the industry? What engages you the most? What's your favorite hobby or activity that fulfills you?
I'm an organic gardener, so I have many, like 14 different raised beds. And then my other big love is golf. I've been
Oh,
golfing for about 35 years. You'd
nice.
think I would putt better than I do, but that's how long I've been golfing.
And I love flying. I've been a pilot for about 30 years, and I love pilot flying, and it's what feeds my spirit, like the river always did.
Amazing.
He's been an adventurer a long time.
Yeah, thrill seeking for his whole life. What
Yeah.
about you, Gaylord?
Outside of the river industry, what are your hobbies and interests?
Outside.
Yeah.
Uh, used to be airplanes, and it's been for years family history.
Great. Well, you guys, I sure appreciate this and your time and your willingness to share with all of us. And yeah, just amazing as I delve more into the history of this and read Whitewater Wars or watch some videos of uh, like pre-Flaming Gorge dory running of the Green. It's fun to think of like what the industry was and how significant uh, like the let's say the foundational members of it were like you to bring us here today. And I just want to thank you for uh, like continuing to give of your time, energy, and spirit. And yeah, we continue to learn and value your wise words. So thank you.
I would like to encourage everyone to go to my Facebook page and watch my 1977, in the beginning 1977 Ocoee River video. It's a fun 20-minute video that has text screens, and I hope everybody enjoys it.
Award winning.
It just won, yeah, the 2024 National Paddling Film Festival Award for Best Amateur Documentary.
Yeah.
Thank you
Gary,
guys so much. This has been fun.
Yes, thank
It's been
y'all.
great.
Gary, you also have a lot of great stories to share on that Facebook page, so you can get a lot of good stories there.
Thank you.
Um, as we wrap up, I just want to thank all of you, Gaylord, Gary, Beth, Aaron. I just sat here smiling and staring at my computer screen. It's so great to hear your stories and to be able to follow in your footsteps and
Aw.
the things that you have done for America Outdoors and the industry. Thank you so much. And thank you for being here today to share those stories. Everyone in the audience, there's quite a few of you. Thank you for being here and spending your time. And this association and this industry is so important to all of us. So thank you all for spending this afternoon with us.
It's been a pleasure.
No,
Thank
thank
you.
y'all.
Thank you so much.
We'll see you all soon. Thank you.
Okay.